Hey everyone, welcome back to Born to Climb. And in this episode, I sit down with Devan Gonzalez. He's a young entrepreneur who turned his passion for fitness into a thriving business. He started as a martial arts instructor at just 13 and then worked his way up until he built a six-figure training business. And now he's franchising nationwide. In this episode, we dive into his journey, the challenges of scaling a business, and the things he had to change in his mindset that helped him take big risks when necessary. So whether you're an entrepreneur or you're just looking for some motivation to push past obstacles and maybe some of those inner fears, well, this conversation is packed with insights you don't want to miss. So let's go ahead and jump in. Hey everybody, welcome back to Born to Climb, and I'm excited to be with Devan Gonzalez. Devan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be fun.
So this is cool because I was actually on Devan's podcast, which is the Mindset Cafe. And so I do want to dig into mindset, and you've done some really impressive things. But before we get that, let's just rewind a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story, where you came from and how you got to where you are now.
Definitely. I mean, my story was, it was more of like the typical bring up, I had my mom, had my dad and everything like that. But in the terms of like my family has always been, W-2 employees and stuff. And I was kind of that black sheep wanting to become an entrepreneur and didn't really have anyone in my corner, saying, yes, you can do it. Yeah, my family out of love were telling me, maybe you should get a normal profession. Maybe you should get a career and go that route. And through my mindset development and through my own personal betting on myself, I went that route and, obviously, we're here talking today and I came out on the other end. But, I started off as a martial arts instructor at the age of 13, and that really led me into, really physical development, personal development. Going into college, I, started off as a business major because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I figured that degree would transfer anywhere. But I started becoming as a personal trainer in college because it fit around my college schedule, and I was like, this is an awesome college job. Then learned about kinesiology in college and transitioned my major. I was like, I could get a degree in this. This is way fun, and then it was like the talk with my parents of, hey, I think I'm just going to end up doing this. Like, I like personal training, and they had their doubts, but, that led me down the role of, going from corporate gyms to training private gyms, building out a whole personal training side for a private gym, and then eventually stepping out on my own and becoming an independent, self-employed trainer, making six figures and doing really well. Help launch a prep school for basketball athletes and everything in between. And then it was like, okay, well, what's next? Like, I'm kind of maxed out on time. What would be the next venture? And that was basically creating a program, which is Strive 11 Fitness, and going in and betting on myself again to actually become a business owner instead of self-employed. And now that's grown from our single location. We launched the franchise aspect of it, and now we're franchising nationwide.
That's fantastic and so inspiring. So many things that you just said in there as well, like betting on myself. So I remember going to college because I initially started in kinesiology, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And then I looked around and I thought, well, what can I do with this degree? And at least back then, I think there were less options. At least that's what I told myself. So it was like, well, I don't want to be a phys ed teacher. And I wanted to go into business. But to get into the business faculty, you needed like 3.7 GPA. I was so far away from that. So I just kind of gave that up. But at the same time, it didn't stop the entrepreneurial drive. So that's what I want to know, Devan, for you, like, where did that come from, since you didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial family? And when did you first recognize that within yourself?
I mean, I always had the entrepreneurial drive. Like in high school, I had t-shirt companies, tried different things along the way, just as little side projects, just because I loved it. And I will say that entrepreneurial drive in high school, seeing my t-shirts around school and around town was, the biggest reward to myself. And it wasn't even about the money or selling them. That was the cool part. It was just seeing it around. And so that, I think, was always that fire that was like kind of dwelling underneath everything. But in college, like, I went the business route and I did just the general business major because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, there's probably so many opportunities with this. But then doing personal training and seeing clients have their results and seeing the light that you get to, have when, or the light you see in their eyes when they accomplish their goals, I was like, I want more of that. It's like this natural high that you get when you see someone else succeeding and they're the ones that put in the work, and you get to have that small imprint on their life. So switching my major, I knew there was different opportunities from, a physical ed teacher, but also a physical therapist, or working with pro athletes and so forth. And so I was like, you know what, I'll figure that part out afterwards. Let me just do the schooling. And honestly, the classes actually interested me. So I was like, I wanted to be in school. I wanted to learn, and so that was the biggest part. I was like, if I'm going to get a degree, I might as well enjoy the process a little bit, not saying that I loved every class. There was some unfun classes, I will say. But that was really that step in not knowing what the end destination would be was okay for me, because I knew at least the end destination would be something along the lines of, what I aligned with and what I really loved.
I think in high school, every high school should have kids do a project where they have to launch a business. I think it would just be fantastic, because there's nothing in my life that I can think of that's forced me, and I use that word, forced me to grow, like, running my own business. And I've done both. I've worked in the non-for-profits and then launched my own business. There's two different values. If you value security and sort of kind of a routine or a safety net, then of course having an employer can be great. But if you value a bunch of other things like freedom and maybe more autonomy or just even creativity, if you don't get to use that, then entrepreneurialism is the way to go for sure. So I think, Devan, there's a lot of people, especially now, like there's a lot of uncertainty. There's more uncertainty at least in America, than I had expected. A lot of people are getting laid off, a few in the government, a lot of people are getting laid off. It's a time for people to think like, what's next for me in my future? Some people listening to this are thinking, should I start something or even start something on the side? What do you find is the biggest thing that holds people back from just doing that?
I will say their limiting beliefs on them being able to be one of those success stories, right? Because I will say that, most people think, and this is where my parents were coming from too, with having a W-2 job or having a career, whether it's corporate, whether it's smaller, it doesn't matter. Like, again, like you said, people are getting laid off right now. So there's still risk to either side of it. And so it's like, what risk are you willing to bet on? Are you willing to bet on this employer is going to hold you for the rest of your life? Or are you willing to bet on yourself, right? And at the end of the day, you can't achieve it. My whole thing is, I tell people is, you're not special, right? And then I pause for a minute and then they always give me that face like, what? And they're like, you're not special enough for it not to work out for you, right? And it be a possibility for everyone else on the planet to be a success story, but you're the one person that can't be a success story. I was like, you're not that special.
I love that. That's a fresh take on that for sure. So when you made the comment, I decided to just bet on myself and to go all in on me. Where did that come from? Were you always like that? Or did that come over time? Where did that mindset of being able to take a risk because you were going to just trust yourself?
I think it's a mindset I may have had all the time from, a certain standpoint, but I wasn't just born with that. Like, I didn't just take risks, from a young age. It was, you want something, and if you want something bad enough, then you go for it, right? And once you achieve it, that's a brick laid in the foundation of, look, it's proof that if you want something, you do the work, you put the effort in, you can achieve it, right? And so whether the goal that you wanted was small and now this one is big in comparison, it doesn't matter, right? Different obstacles, there's, new devils at new levels, but it's the fact that these are all proofs. You've done it before, at a different scale. You can do it again. You may not be the version of you that is able to, be at that goal point right now, but that doesn't mean you're not the person that's going to go out and find the tools, find the resources, do the trainings that you need to be to become that version of you that is deserving of that goal or is able to accomplish, the obstacles along that journey.
What would you say is one of the biggest obstacles that you have run into so far in business? Like big enough where you're like, whoa, I don't know if I can get through this.
I think honestly, it still comes down to mindset. Like, because you have your perception of the world, right? And I say perception, like reality is perception, because your past experiences, your life's journey up to this point, you've shaped a view of what your reality is. And so when you go through different levels in entrepreneurship, especially, you know, self-employed to business owner, now to CEO, it's like you have to continuously change your view on how the world works and see it from different people's standpoints. And that's one of the toughest things, I would say, is being able to step back, analyze how you're looking at a situation and be like, is this really the only way to look at this? Like, how would someone else look at this? How would they perceive it? You know, but launching the franchise, I would say, was probably the biggest, like, you know, if I had to put a mark on it, you know, hurdle, because it took me 13 months to close my first franchise deal, right? And that was a point where I wanted to throw my laptop across the room a few times and be like, you know what, this ain't the move. I'm over it, you know? But it was like, other people have done it, right? And there's plenty of people that have done it and been successful at it. So that's my proof, right? I don't know how long it took them to sell their first franchise. It could have took a month. It could have took 4 years. But at the end of the day, look, they did it, which means I can do it too.
100%. Yeah. And you're doing it, which is fantastic. When did you first get that idea? Like, I'm going to franchise.
The idea, I mean, the model was built to be different than our competitors, you know, and that was the whole thing. I didn't want to open up a gym that was just a copy and paste replica of other models. So when that came about, that was already in the back of my mind, is like, is this something that's going to be franchisable and stuff? Because my biggest core value is to have a positive impact on as many lives as I can while I can, knowing that we're only here for a short amount of time. And my moving from self-employed to business owner was to be able to change more people's lives from a physical standpoint, you know, health standpoint. But now with the franchise model, not only do I get to do that, but also I get to change people's lives from being a W-2 employee or an employed person to now becoming that business owner that they've wanted to become, and impact their family, their legacy on a financial standpoint.
So imagine I invited you to speak to a group of people, and I told you, you know, Devan, these are college graduates. They just came out. They're not sure what they want to do, but you're going to give a presentation on why they should consider starting their own business and what it takes to be successful. And you can only have 3 points. What's going to be the outline of your talk? What 3 things are you going to talk about?
I would say the first thing is, you know, just analyze, right? Analyze the world around you, right? See what else is out there. What do you gravitate towards? Like, what do you do in your day right now? What do you buy? What do you use? Like, look at the things around you in that aspect. What do you currently use that could be better? Where do you see problems in your day, right? So analyze would be the first aspect of it, because that's usually where business creation comes from. You know, that's how my business was formed, from being a self-employed, you know, trainer, have my clients go to boot camps and them all coming back with the same problem from different companies. It was like, okay, well, here's a problem I can solve, right? After that is knowing that it's a process, right? So trust the process, but also be engaged and intentional in the process. Stop looking at the destination and just focus on the journey. Right? There's going to be failures. There's going to be learning lessons. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. It's all part of that process. And you are not alone in the journey of the ups and the downs, right? And then lastly is shifting your mindset to make sure that you're focusing on the problem and focusing on the customers or the clients, right? The money comes, right? The money will come with that. But if you're focused on the money, it is read through, you know, everything you say, everything you do. People can get that energy and get that feeling, and you're gonna have a limited amount of growth because you're focused on the wrong aspect of business.
Love it. I think that would be a great presentation. You know, I think the best times to start businesses, I think there's 2 of them. There's 2 seasons of life. One is when you're young and you don't even have to be out of college. You don't even have to go to college. But one is when you're young, because the risks you're taking really, they're only impacting you for the most part. Like, it's really the time to swing for the fence, go for it. And if you fail, okay, pick yourself back up. There's, you know, unless you have kids, but usually I'm talking about when you're young and you have no kids. I think the other time to launch a business is actually when you're in my season of life, when your kids are now off to college and working and starting to support themselves. You have this other window. Not that you can't in other times, of course. You just got to mitigate the risk a little bit different, right? Because your dream to start a business when you're 35 and you got 3 young kids at home, all right, well, it can't just be about you now. You got to make sure that's okay, that the kids are okay. But when you're young and when you're at my age, I'm not going to call myself old yet, but when you're experienced, these are great times. What I have found in my entrepreneurial journey is just, I guess if there's lessons I've learned, is that failure has been my companion. And sometimes I think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have failed so much. Like if I want to count like all different offers or different products or different ideas, like things that I've tried that didn't work. And for a while it used to bother me, like, oh, like obviously I must not be good at this because I just keep failing. But that's really part of the journey, isn't it? Do you think?
100%. And I agree with you. There's different stages. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I mean, there's a graveyard full of business ideas and business attempts and stuff that didn't work out. But now in my 30s and having, a daughter and, one on the way, I still am of that mindset. Like I still go all in, right? But I know that's not everybody in the same, area of life or section of life that I'm in, and that's okay, right? But later in life as well, now you do have a different take. You got to mitigate, thinking about retirement and so forth. But again, it's all about how you play the game, right? You can start something as a side project, let it grow and go all in once it makes sense. Or you can go into like a franchise that already has a blueprint, so you don't need to start from scratch, right? So I think it's just realizing that there's a different path at each stage, but also each stage for each person is individual. It's personalized, right? And you can't think that a blueprint for someone else and a blueprint for you is going to be the same journey and the same path to success.
For sure. That's a great point. And I think sometimes, today we've got social media, which can both hurt and help. It hurts in that sometimes you see all these stories of people being successful, and part of it's marketing of, how they're making 100K a month and 200K a month. And then you're wondering like, well, I'm not making that. What's wrong with me? But it's also helpful in that you are able to see all the different ways people make money. I mean, it is, when I was in high school or even in college, I mean, the internet was just coming out, but nobody was using it to make money yet. So your options of making money were pretty like hands-on. They were limited. Not that there was a limit of money, but now, I mean, you can start a business in an afternoon and make money the next day. I mean, you really can. But again, it comes back down to those things you mentioned before, finding a need, something that people want, and then just going all in on you and understanding that, yeah, you're going to have some setbacks along the way. What's your secret, Devan, when you have those moments that are tough and you're feeling discouraged? What's your kind of way of getting back on top of your game again?
I mean, I would say that comes more times than not, as an entrepreneur. It is a tough road, right? And it's not for everybody, and that's okay. But for myself, knowing like the 13 months, like there was day after day where I was feeling like this, and having to get back on the phones and, get back into presentations the next day or right after one that didn't work out, like it could be tough. So for me, like putting down the phone or getting off the computer, getting out of the gym and, going out for a walk or a run, or, just like, okay, I'm gonna take a break for an hour and spend some time with my daughter, just change of scenery for me was huge. But then also sometimes like that was going to work out, and my safe space is working out. Like sometimes I'll have my headphones on, but no music will be playing, just to kind of silence out the noise. But that's where my creative space is as well. So the problems will still be there when you're done with your workout. But while you're working out, all of a sudden you start to clear your mind, settle it, and realize, what is my reason why? Like, why is this? What would this do for my life if this works out? What would this do to my life if it didn't work out? Is it still worth it?
Those are great questions. What would this be if this worked out? What's my life look like if this doesn't? I heard a guy recently, I can't remember who it is, and he had said, it's good to keep in front of you sort of the heaven and the hell, like what your life exactly what you just said, right? Like what your life looks like if you change and make this happen, and if you don't make any changes, where are you going to be? And I can tell you, you're going to be in the same place you are now. Who's ever listening, right? Because just the way our lives run, they run in these patterns and these loops, and you'll be in the same spot 5 years from now, unless you're able to make changes. So I think that's so important. When I look back at my journey, and there's definitely times where I was super excited, times I was super discouraged, right? There's the roller coaster of it. And here's something interesting I've found. A lot of entrepreneurs are creative people. And I'm generalizing here, but a lot of times creative people are not necessarily good to get on the phone and make a call, go to a networking event, get rejected. It's almost like those are polar opposites. At least they are in my life. Like I'm very creative, but I still, even now, there's the shadow of a fear of rejection that I'll have to fight through even now to get back on the phone and call someone. Did you ever have that, jumping on the calls, trying to sell your franchises?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm just like yourself. I am the creative one I do have a business partner, and I'm the creative one out of us. But he also didn't have an entrepreneurial background. So I had to be the visionary and the integrator until he was able to start taking some of those roles. And he's naturally more of an integrator in self. So I just had to help him, build that self-confidence. But in terms of going out, networking, all that kind of stuff, like I'm not naturally an extrovert. Like I'm not going to go out and if it's a crowded room, like I'm not going to be the one talking. Like I like to just observe and, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, there is a goal, and that goal needs to be hit. And if you don't have the financial means to have a team, then you have to put those hats on. And even when you do have a team, they don't know a direction to go if they don't have a path that you've already created or established for them. Just because it's in your head and there's no given direction doesn't mean they're going to be successful at it, right? You have to be able to take your vision and make it an actual physical thing, whether it's a system and process, whether it's an actual product. Like otherwise, it's going to stay in your head, right? So you have to get out of that comfort zone a little bit, because even think about, you're married, I'm married, right? It's uncomfortable, asking a girl out or asking a guy out and getting rejected, right? And you don't want to get on the phone and shoot them a text because you don't know how they're going to respond. And so like it's all around life, right? And if you take it and just view it that way, like it's the same stepping out of your comfort zone. You want a girlfriend, you want to go on a date, well, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. It's an awkward phase and you don't really know what to do yet, but that's okay, right? It starts to come with it. But with business, the difference is like you have YouTube, you have Google, right? I didn't know how to sell, even though I worked for corporate gyms. Like they gave you a single script that didn't work out for me. So what I did is I went to YouTube, I went to Google and started watching other people's stuff and adopted their versions of the same script for the corporate job. Ended up getting in trouble because they wanted me to read it verbatim from the script. And I was like, I don't understand, because like I'm saying everything you want me to say, just in a different way, in a different order, and I'm at the top seller. Like I don't understand, like obviously your thing doesn't work for me, right? But I'm naturally not a born seller or a born, leader, even though some would say I am. Those are all acquired skills through learning, stepping out of my comfort zone, running a team now. Like now I'd love being self-employed because I could only, bet on myself, and if I didn't win or I did win, it was all based off of my performance. But running a team is completely different. It's a whole different, step of, fear in trusting someone else with your baby, right? But those are all things that you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit in any area of life if you want to see growth.
That's definitely the entrepreneur in you, to create your own sales script and to modify it. And so corporate of them to be like, no, you have to do it this way. So that's so funny. I'm still, it never ceases to amaze me that I'll run across someone who's really not that creative, and yet they're just an implementer. Like they will get up, they will pick up the phone 100 times and get 100 no's, and it just doesn't seem to faze them. And yet they will just be wildly successful. And I think at the end of the day, obviously I value creativity, but at the end of the day, that only gets you so far. And it's easy. This is for those of you who are listening that have a business and sometimes you wonder why you're not selling more. Something to take a look at. I've seen this in my own life. It's so easy when you run a business to distract yourself from the actual things to grow your business. And so just there's the creative part of you that's like, I don't know if I like that blue on my website. Maybe we should do a different shade, but first I should learn about brand profiles first. And then you burn a day just trying to rebrand your colors on Canva when you could have just got on the phone and made money. So I've noticed that pattern in my life. When you think about business, Devan, what do you think is the key to a business being successful? So not like you, the entrepreneur, but the business itself.
I will say in agreement with what you're just saying, right? I forget the title of the universal law, but it's 20% of the work that we do is 80% of the results. And that 20% we usually kind of put on the back burner because it's the harder things, or the calling leads and developing a system and process and all those things. But that's what gets 80% of the results. And as a business to grow, there needs to be people doing that 20%, whether it's yourself in the beginning and now you have a team, or it's you in general. But it's realizing that a team needs to be doing the things that move the business forward, right? And some of that actually just comes from the basic just customer service, right? Customer relationship building. And that's what goes into that third point of the presentation, that I was mentioning earlier, was the fact that if you focus on the money, you will basically not grow and not succeed. If you focus on the customer, the client, their problems, but also how they are doing, and just build relationships, you'll notice that your bank account will start going up, the business will start growing, you'll get referrals, you get those Google, 5-star reviews, all that kind of stuff. That happens through building relationships and caring about the people that you're trying to serve. Because being an entrepreneur and in a business is just being a servant, essentially. And I know it sounds bad, but you're serving a demographic, you're serving your customers. And if you keep viewing it that way, your business will continue to grow.
That's a great perspective. It really is easy to lose sight of the customer and why you're doing what you're doing when you add stress and you add a team and you got to make payroll and you're trying to figure it out. One of the things that I started doing was I had to write down a list of, these are the things, at least that I think or know over time, these are the things that make my business successful. And most of them are not sexy at all. Like, it's just not. It's like, okay, you got to go on LinkedIn and engage with some people, and okay, you got to create a piece of content. And so I have this list of this daily SOPs. Because, it's one thing if I go to a conference and I speak there, okay, great, I'm going to be in my element. I know I'm going to do a great job. I know I'm going to pull a lot of leads from stage. But that's not every day, right? So that could be once a month, once every 2 months. So I have this list of these daily SOPs that, and then SOPs are the wrong word for it, but that at the end of the day, I just take a look at it and like, did you do this? Because often when I don't, it's because it was my creativity that took me away. Like, oh, but I had this idea to create a new offer, and so I did that. But what I have found is that it's the boring side of business, but it reins in my undiscipline at times and holds myself accountable. Like, yeah, I know you didn't want to go on LinkedIn, but why didn't you go on LinkedIn? Right. So I have to have those conversations with myself because no one else is having them with me, other than my bank account will have it with me. But what do you do to help yourself stay focused, Devan?
And exactly what you're saying. We actually have a checklist at our front desk that the trainers, check off a list of, did this get accomplished in the morning shift? Did this get accomplished in the evening shift? And then that way, those are the things that, because otherwise without that in the beginning, it was like, we forgot to make a post on social media. We forgot to reach out to our client list and all these things. And then it goes by a week and you're like, oh wait, no one's even called our leads. That's why we have no sales. So that checklist for the gym and the business itself is huge. But I also have that same checklist for myself, which changes every single day. So what I do is I'll plan out the night ahead, like what I'm going to do the next day. Right. And those are the tasks that I work on first. And then if, let's say, that creative side comes and, I want to kind of explore, I'll put that on the list at the end, right? And make sure I get through my other things. But I know that if I don't write it down on my list, I also have like the memory of a goldfish and will forget in, 5 seconds. Then I'm like, dang, what was that thing I wanted to do, right? What was I going to work on, right? And so you could also use those as fillers within your schedule. So I think it's huge on, creating a list to accomplish within the day. And it might be one thing, it might be 5 things. Like I wouldn't go more than 5, just because then if you don't accomplish it, then it starts to have this, negative, subconscious feeling that when you don't get all the things you plan to get done, you're like, man, like today was not successful, right? So 1 to 5 things, depending on the weight of the task. If you're redeveloping your website, that's gonna take some hours, right? And then allow yourself, some time in your schedule to work out, to, have time with your family. Like I already know my scheduled time with my family is 6 to 8, and for me that works for me because my wife gets home from work, my daughter's home from preschool, and everything is, good. But I spend undivided time with them, and then afterwards, if I still need to accomplish the task and finish the task, then I work afterwards.
So what's Devan's life look like in 5 years?
It'll be, really working on the national franchise. I'm not one of those people that's looking for time freedom. Like I actually like business. It's a game to me, and I love the game of business, and I love fitness. So being in the fitness business just makes it that much more fun and rewarding. But, really just scaling this to be, a leader in the fitness industry for the franchise.
I'm glad you said that about time freedom. That's something that a lot of people will market, start your own business so you can have time freedom. And it's true in some ways, depending how we're defining freedom, but it's also not true in many ways. I work harder and longer hours than when someone else wrote my paycheck. I probably take less vacation, but it's not because I can't. It's just I enjoy what I'm doing, and so to me, that's a huge win right there. Obviously, not everything you are going to like about the process. Sometimes I make a distinction between your work and your job, right? Like your work is what you do. It's the bigger picture, the impact you're having. But your job, there's certain parts of your job that you don't like. I don't like getting stuck in a layover in Atlanta airport, but that's part of the job. I don't like that. But when I lose sight of what my work is, right, which is inspiring people, helping leaders, become better leaders, which has an impact on other people. When I lose sight of that, then obviously it impacts me. So anyways, yeah. And then back to the point about time freedom, I see some people out there like, I run my business on 4 hours a day. And I get that they might run that business on 4 hours a day, but then I bet they probably have 3 other businesses that they do 4 hours a day. Like right. It's just part of the entrepreneurial makeup. Actually, I don't know one single entrepreneur who only works 4 hours a day, and I don't know what they do for the other 12 hours that they're awake. Do you know anyone like that?
I do not. I know people that speak of it, and usually it's someone that wants to become an entrepreneur, and they read the 4-hour work week, and whatever the case, it's like when you become an entrepreneur, like you're trading a 9 to 5 for a 24/7, right? And just because you're not at the business doesn't mean the business isn't still running. Your team is still going to send you an email, send you a text, hey, this happened, and you still have to come up with a solution. But I think to go into like the freedom aspect a little bit more, like for me, freedom isn't about time. It's not about, again, I could go on vacations more frequently, but I decide not to. And it's like, not because we don't want to, it's because freedom to me is the fact of doing what you want when you want because you want to do it, right? If you want to go on vacation and that's what you value right now, you could book a flight, right? But you want to serve your purpose and you want to be at work because you also love it and it is a passion of yours, right? So that's true freedom, is being able to do what you want when you want.
Last question for you, Devan. How important is purpose, not purpose, how important is passion in all of this as an endeavor?
I mean, I think it's one of the cornerstones of it, right? Passion. If you're not passionate about something, people, when you're trying to make connections and trying to grow, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's in your relationship, there's no passion, then, there's not going to be a reception to it. People aren't going to feel that, you really are there to serve them. But your passion is really aligned with your purpose, right? Once you can find what you're passionate about, you could also start to find what your purpose is on this earth, right? For me, is seeing people transform their lives and build that self-confidence. That was a passion of mine, and I now realize that's my purpose, is to be able to give them the tools that they need to be able to succeed at.
That's fantastic. So with your franchise, update us. Where do you have gyms currently?
So we have our main one in Tarzana, California, so Los Angeles County. We're opening up in Tampa, Florida, and then we have the 3 other ones coming in Uvalde, Texas, Arlington, Texas, and Vancouver, Washington.
And if someone would like to know more about that for your franchises, where should they go?
They can go to Strive and then 11 as in 11 fitness.com/franchise.
Strive11.com/franchise. We'll put that in the show notes. If you're driving, you'll have to wait till you're home for that, but we'll have that in the show notes. Go to jamesrobbins.com/podcast and look up this episode with Devan. Well, Devan, I want to thank you for being on Born to Climb, and I just love talking to entrepreneurs, of course, and I'm always inspired when I see people who, what I would call young, meaning in your 20s and 30s, just doing an amazing job, taking risks, betting on yourself, because as you do that, it inspires a lot of other entrepreneurs around you. And hopefully someone listening today is going to find inspiration in your story. And again, it was great to meet you. It was great to be on your show. And thanks for being on Born to Climb. And I wish you all the best and look forward to watching your success.
Thank you so much for having me.